Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second session of our live dialogues of our DEI Workplace Challenge. Next slide, please. We'd like to take the opportunity to thank our sponsors, Hypertherm Associates, New Hampshire Charitable Foundation, Revision Energy, Merchants Fleet, Kennebunk Savings, and our media partners, NHPR, NHBR, specifically 603 Diversity Magazine, for making this challenge possible for all our members for free. Next. So the intent of today's call. Each week, we dive into a specific issue or a marginalized community. And today's call, we have lived experience and expertise in the LGBTQ community. The DEI content part of the call will address issues that the LGBTQ community faces in the workplace, why it is important to create inclusive workplaces, and what resources and practices would help your culture and workplace become more inclusive. We then, as usual, will go on to practice learning and finding innovative solutions with our peers through dialogue and in the breakout rooms and back to the plenary. Next. So before we start, we always like to read the guidelines of how we show up. We speak from personal experience with I statements. We take responsibility for the quality of the discussion. And if you know that you are a talker, share airtime, hear all the voices, come from the orientation that we're all learning, be in a brave space, recognize you may be uncomfortable, be curious, listen to gain greater clarity, expect non-closure. We need to sit with our questions, and we ask for confidentiality. While we do record the content period, we do not record any of the discussions after we pose the question. A few safety tips. Those of us who work for NHBSR have that right next to their name. So if you have any concerns, please go ahead, or any technical issues, and send them to one of us. You can also access the chat by hovering over the bottom of your Zoom window, and you can direct messages directly to one of us as hosts or to everyone while you're chatting. If you are uncomfortable in a breakout room that you were placed in or would like to be reassigned, feel free to leave the breakout room, come back, and we can easily reassign you. Next. So the flow of this call, we just went through the guidelines. We are now moving into the DEI context, and then we'll go through the DEI innovation exercise, which is the one for all approach. We want you to sit with a question for a few minutes on your own, and then go into groups of 4, and then we come back and share the learnings as a total group. And then at the end, we'll discuss the events that are coming up. Back one slide. For our speakers. Our speakers today are Rebecca Sanborn. Rebecca is the founder and president of Sanborn Diversity Solutions. Through training and consulting, Rebecca helps organizations increase their LGBTQ+ cultural proficiency and ensure that they are utilizing best practices for LGBTQ+ diversity, equity, and inclusion. Previously, she practiced law for 17 years in New Hampshire. She earned her JD from UNH Franklin Pierce School of Law, and also holds a diversity and inclusion professional certificate and a certificate in advanced employee relations, both from Cornell University. We also have Janelle Drake. She/her is a founding member of the Affirming Spaces Project, a nonprofit organization which provides training focused on gender-affirming practices to businesses and organizations around New England. Since ASP's launch in 2021, over 70 businesses have received the training and made their space more welcoming to people of all genders. And we have a link in the chat for the extended bios. And at this point, I will hand it over to Rebecca.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Zena. It took me a moment to unmute myself. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see that. Good afternoon. As Zena mentioned, my name is Rebecca Sanborn. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I am really delighted to be here with you this afternoon along with Janelle. I think it's fair to say that all of us on this call share a belief in the power of diversity and equity and the importance of every employee experiencing inclusion and belonging at work. And I'm sure we also have a shared belief in the importance of customers being treated with respect and made to feel welcome. And these goals are especially key for employees and customers who were members of underserved or marginalized communities, such as the LGBTQ community. So those are goals that we all support. But for many members of the LGBTQ community, these goals are not being realized. At first glance, it may seem or may feel like a lot of progress has been made for the LGBTQ community. After all, we have same-sex marriage, we have greater media representation of LGBTQ folks, and every June we see corporations celebrating Pride and turning their logos rainbow. And yes, if we look at the sweep of history over the past 50 years, a great deal of progress has been made. However, if you look below the surface view, you'll see there is much work to be done. And in some instances, we've even slid backwards. Day in and day out, LGBTQ folks still experience discrimination, harassment, violence, and even coordinated attacks on the rights and legal protections of the LGBTQ community, especially the trans community. So how does that play out in an organization? Here are just a few of the challenges faced by LGBTQ folks in the workplace and the marketplace. Experiencing discrimination and harassment at work. In the US, almost half of LGBTQ workers, 45.5%, have experienced at some point in their careers some form of unfair treatment at work, including harassment, discrimination, being fired, or not even being hired in the first place due to discrimination based on their LGBTQ status. And this is according to a 2021 report by the Williams Institute at UCLA School of Law. Feeling forced to stay in the closet or cover. According to the same survey, about 40% of LGBTQ employees stay in the closet at their jobs out of fear and to avoid harassment and discrimination. I know a lot about that. I stayed in the closet until relatively later in life. This is also known as covering, a phenomenon experienced not just by LGBTQ folks, but by members of other underrepresented and marginalized populations as well. And covering is essentially downplaying or hiding a person's stigmatized identity. So an unsupportive culture towards LGBTQ employees leads many of them to stay in the closet and cover out of fear. And obviously that's energy that is not available to be placed into engagement at work. And many LGBTQ folks are pushed out altogether by toxic work environments. Another issue is hitting the lavender ceiling. The LGBTQ advocacy group Out and Equal defines the lavender ceiling this way. Similar to the glass ceiling faced by women, the lavender ceiling is a calcified mix of overt and subtle bias, limiting stereotypes and structural inequalities, all resulting in career blockages for LGBTQ plus employees. Here's a sobering fact. Amongst all the Fortune 500 companies, there are only 4 openly LGBTQ plus CEOs. Similarly, according to a 2023 study conducted by Out and Equal, nearly half of the survey respondents, 49%, said that their company's C-suite is not representative of the LGBTQ plus community at all. And then there's the public-facing side of organizations. For example, as Janelle from the Affirming Spaces Project will touch on, I believe, in a few minutes, LGBTQ plus customers and clients have needs as well. They need to feel welcomed and supported by the organizations they do business with. And they expect, we expect, and deserve respect in the community and the marketplace. We don't want to give our hard-earned dollars to a business only to be treated with disrespect or microaggressions. So as you can see, there are many challenges to be faced by the LGBTQ community in the context of the workplace and the marketplace. So how can organizations deal with these challenges? I won't go into detail here, but I'm going to provide you with 3 categories of actions that your organization can take to drive positive change in these areas. One is policies and procedures. Equity and inclusion for the LGBTQ plus employees, and I would add for all underrepresented populations, need to be woven throughout the organization's policies, procedures, and benefits. This provides a good foundation. Some examples would be a strong, meaningful non-discrimination policy, which includes specifically protections on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. Another example would be extending benefit plans that ensure parity among LGBTQ and non-LGBTQ workers. Organizational culture. This is about ensuring that an organization has a culture of inclusion and belonging, which aligns with those inclusive policies and procedures that they hopefully put on paper. This is about the interpersonal relationships. LGBTQ workers need to feel that they can bring their full, authentic selves to work without fear of discrimination, social isolation, or microaggressions. And then again, back to that public-facing side. Are your advertisements, public media, and promotional materials inclusive and diverse? Can members of the LGBTQ community see themselves there? LGBTQ and allied folks who are your potential customers are looking for that. And you know who else is? Potential employees. So this is relevant to recruitment and retention efforts as well. And this is also where treatment of customers and clients comes into play, as I was talking about earlier. Are your workers educated and culturally sensitive to the LGBTQ community. Can you rest assured that LGBTQ customers and clients will be treated respectfully and appropriately? So hopefully these brief points will serve to get you thinking about how your own organization can drive positive change and pursue innovative solutions for greater equity and inclusion. I'd like to close out with 2 quotes to round out these brief reflections. The first is by Dr. David Hall in his book, Allies at Work. Excuse me. He says, corporations are working for every possible competitive advantage. As companies do so, an increasing number of them have determined that it's good business to be lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender friendly. And finally, I find inspiring quote from Celeste Berry, who's the founding executive director of Out and Equal Workplace Advocates. And she says, only with courage and solidarity of our allies can we create workplaces that are truly out and equal. Thank you so much for listening this morning, or this afternoon rather, and I look forward to continuing the conversation with you. And I'll turn it back over to Zena.
Thank you. And we're now going to go to Janelle's presentation and learn more about what Affirming Spaces does and the resources they provide.
Thank you, Zena.
No.
Give me a second just to share my screen here. All right, I hope you all can see that.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about Affirming Spaces Project, which is the nonprofit organization I co-founded a few years ago. We are a group of volunteers who are trying to make a network of transgender inclusive businesses and organizations across New England. The goal is to help trans and gender nonconforming individuals find places where they know they'll feel welcome and to drive more traffic to those businesses and organizations who want to be models of acceptance for the community. So as Rebecca stated, it's good business to be LGBT friendly. And we kind of formed our organization in response to non-discrimination protections that were put in place in New Hampshire in 2018. But just because you can't be fired or denied housing for being transgender or gender nonconforming doesn't mean that someone won't intentionally or unintentionally make a toxic environment for someone or a place that's not welcome. So we aim to combat this by providing an hour-long training to businesses who want to be listed as ASP community partners. Once all the members are trained, ASP then advertises the businesses and promotes those inclusive spaces on our social media channels. The database of businesses can also be used as a tool for the trans community and their allies, where anyone can find places that they know they'll feel affirmed in their gender identity or presentation. So, I mentioned before, this organization formed as a response to positive legislature a few years ago. It's especially important to continue doing the work that we do now because there's been just waves and waves of negative legislature lately. So there are bills attacking healthcare, bathroom access, ability for students to go to school comfortably as themselves or even join sports teams. So having these spaces that are welcoming and affirming are especially important in this day and age. ASP's training, the first half goes over concepts of gender and pronouns just to make sure that everyone has the same baseline knowledge going into the deeper conversation. The second half goes into practices that can be implemented to make a space welcoming for everyone. And things that we go over in the second half are updates to language. So making your language more neutral. Instead of saying, hey guys, how's it going? You could say things like, hey folks, or hey everyone. How products in restrooms or other personal spaces are labeled. For instance, you could label clothing instead of men's and women's clothing if you sell clothing as straight fit or curvy fit to give a better description of what the clothing does or how it fits on the body without saying specifically who it belongs to. And then also we help with updating information on paper forms, language on websites, all sorts of things like that. And after the training, ASP is available to help out. So if any of our community partners want to reach out by email and say, hey, can you look at these things that we've updated, these forms, these websites, we are happy to do so and provide that service as well. With partnering with ASP, you receive free training to keep up with an ever-changing society. We do this because we don't want cost to be a barrier to making inclusive spaces, especially for smaller businesses and organizations in the area who may not be able to afford, a much more expensive training that could sometimes range $20,000 to $40,000 from high-end training facilities. We also provide free advertising to the community for socially conscious consumers to go and purchase or use the services that businesses provide. Lastly, providing better support to employees and customers by being welcoming. More customers want to go to you, more employees want to work for you, and it's really a win for everyone. A couple quotes from existing community partners are on the slide. You can see from the second one, as a queer-owned business, it's easy for us to put up a flag and say we are welcoming, but learning the nuances of gender inclusion and how we approach our business has been so valuable. So even if you have some knowledge or are part of the LGBT community, our training proves to be beneficial for everyone so that you can learn all the nuances, all the small details that might help you to be the most welcoming to your customers and employees as possible. If you want to contact us to discuss becoming a community partner, you can either email us or visit our website, which will be provided in the chat. And you can fill out the Become a Partner form under the Get Involved tab. We're also on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, all at Affirming Spaces. And if you want to kind of do an audit of your space without contacting Affirming Spaces Project, another link will be shared in the chat, which is kind of a checklist form that I found from another organization called Forge, which gives you a lot of details of things to check off. It is mostly geared towards social work, so all of the checkboxes might not apply to your specific business, but it would certainly be a good start to help think about where gender and gendered language comes up in any business or organization. That is all I have, so thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Janelle. And we are going to share the question for the discussion today. So this is the process that we're going to follow. We would like you to take a few minutes, a couple of minutes while we set up the breakout rooms so that you can write your own ideas. And then we're going to go into groups of 4. And after 15 minutes, we'll come back and discuss as a group. Again, today we're offering the open space extra 30 minutes of discussion. We know that it's valuable that you have access to the experts in the room, and feel free to ask your questions and stay on for the extra time if you can. Our question today: what do you think it means to be LGBTQ friendly? What are some practices you can implement to be welcoming and inclusive for LGBTQ employees and customers? The question is in chat, so you have access to it, and we'll give you a couple of minutes while we set up the breakout rooms.